So far in welfare analysis, we answered these two questions, or at least I presented the welfare analysis approach to answer these two questions. Who in our society should produce these goods? Okay, and in welfare analysis, we say it is best that we allow voluntary entry and exit to and from the market. So whoever wants to produce, they can come in freely, and once it becomes too expensive for them, they can leave freely. And now, once you produce the goods, who in a society should get and consume these goods? Well, whoever value it the most, right? Because it gives us, and the key here is, it gives us a measurable way, right, of knowing whether or not we're doing the right thing. Right? So if we can, if the person, if individuals who value the good the most, right, and if they're getting the goods, right, then at least we can get a sense of the welfare that's generated from consumption. Right. All right. Now, here's a video that I recommend, right, and it really captures the role of prices in society, right? So prices is an information tool. It's a tool to communicate among everybody, right, in society. Okay, so I typically will talk more about this topic in my micro econ class, but we're not going to dig into it here. But for those of you interested in getting a different perspective on prices, I suggest you take a look at this video. All right, now we still haven't answered the first question yet. Is how much, all right, of goods should we produce? Okay, so that's where equilibrium comes in. So supply and demand. Now, notation wise, again, just a reminder, QS means quantity supplied. That's the amount supplied by the supplier. And then quantity demanded. That means that this is the amount, all right, demanded by the consumers. And then there's the market price. All right, so let's say that we have the schedule. Schedule is the same as just the function. It means that here is basically our supply curve, and then here is the demand curve. Okay, so looking at this, right, then if you had to guess where is the equilibrium, right? And you can see it's clearly here, right, at $2, right, at $2, then the market clears, right? Suppliers is willing to supply $80, and consumer is willing to buy 80 tons or 80 bags. Oh, sorry, I should say it again. At $2, suppliers will supply 80, and then people with the consumers will demand 80. At any other price, right? There's a misalignment. Okay, there's a misalignment, and suppliers, right, will not produce something that they cannot sell, right? Because there's a cost to production, and vice versa, consumers will not buy something, right, that it doesn't, they will not buy something if the cost or if the price exceeds their benefit that they get from it, right? So it must be here where this is the market equilibrium, okay? And that's also where the market clears, okay? So in another way, so a common phrase that we also use, except besides equilibrium, right, is market is the idea of market clearing, okay? And I'll just do a quick sketch here, right? So we have our demand and supply as such. Right? Here's our demand and our supply, and this is, remember, this is the marginal benefit curve, and this is the marginal cost curve. Okay. All right. So later on in the semester, we're gonna use marginal cost and marginal benefit in place of demand and supply. All right. And here we just want to use our notations. So usually I will use Q star as the market equilibrium, and P star, equilibrium quantity, P star equilibrium price. Right. So I think a more intuitive definition would be these are the market clearing, right? Market clearing price and quantity. The market clearing price and quantity. All right. Now, but the phrase. Oh, let me go back over there. All right. Now equilibrium also is intuitive and very useful because it implies that it implies a steady state. Okay, so this is something that we borrow from physics, right? Because the economy or the market is not always in equilibrium. All right. So I'll mention this just briefly. As most of you covered this before. We have a situation called a surplus. That's when quantity supplied, right, is greater than quantity demanded. Right? So imagine price at P1. Right? So at P1, suppliers really like it, so suppliers will produce at Q3. But however, at this high price, consumers will only demand Q1. So consumers only consumer, right? Their quantity demanded is lower. So therefore, we have a surplus. Now, in a free market, right, where there's entries and there's no barrier to entries and exit, typically surpluses do not last, right? Because to sell the surplus, suppliers will start lowering the price. They'll start lowering the price, and the consequence of that is, as the price lowers, then more consumers will enter the market to buy the goods, right? And also, at this, at this surplus, right? Suppliers will leave the market because they're simply not selling. Right, they're losing money now, so suppliers will leave the market. Okay? And as they leave the market, right, price will decrease. All right. So in the short run, you might have the surplus, but in the long run, right, the market will reach equilibrium. Okay. Now, typically, when there is a long-term surplus that is usually sustained by the government. Okay, so here's a nice video talking about our farm subsidy and how it causes a cheese surplus. Okay, all right. A shortage, right, is the opposite. A shortage is when the price is below the equilibrium price, right? And so when the price is low, consumers consumers right, have a very high demand. However, at the low price, producers, right, are unwilling to produce, right, that much. Okay, so this creates a shortage, right? And again, in a free economy with a free market with entries and exit freely, typically we don't have shortages in the short run. Right? You have shortages in the short run, but you don't have shortages in the long run. In the long run, right, price will go up, right, because demand is higher than supply, so price will increase. And as price increase, more people will supply the goods, okay, and then people who demand the goods, will there will be less people demand the goods because price is going up, right? Okay. Now, in welfare analysis, right? So going back all the way to the beginning, in welfare analysis, our goal is to measure, right, the welfare generated by the production and the consumption of a particular good. Right? So we can sketch this. We can sketch these two curves in, and now in order to measure something, we first have to define it first. So the benefit to consumers from the consumption of a good, we call that consumer surplus. Right, and so the consumer surplus is the area under the curve, under the demand curve, above the price. So imagine that you are willing to pay $20 for a gallon of gasoline. You wouldn't want to pay $20, but you're willing to pay $20, right? Because that's how much a gallon of gasoline is worth to you. Now, if you only pay $3, then that is basically you have $17 left in your pocket, right? That is a surplus. Right? And so at this price, because we have one price in the market, right, then if we allocate the goods to people who value it the most, then they will have the most surplus. And we can add up all the consumer surplus, right, in our society, and this will be the net benefit to consumers. Okay? Now, for producers, right, producers sell the product at a price, and then they minus the cost of production, and that is their producer surplus. Okay, you can also call it profit. Now, technically, it's not profit because we are not considering fixed costs here, but that's okay for our class. Right? If you want to call this profit, that is fine. Right? Producer surplus is similar. It's basically a profit, right? And then here, right, we have producers who can make the most profit, right, come and produce the good, right? And and then as we get to this point here, right, there is no more profit. There's no more profit to be made. So our goal then is to maximize this total social welfare, which is just the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. Now, right now, we are assuming that there's no tax and then there's no externality. So the only people affected in our society by this good is the consumer and the producers. And so that is why we call this the total social welfare for this market. Right? Of course, there are other markets, but for this market, the total social welfare added to the market is this area here. Then now we can finally answer the question, what is the optimal production level, right? How much gasoline should we produce? Okay, and the answer is the quantity that maximizes total social welfare. Right? And what quantity is that? That is the quantity at the equilibrium, at the intersection here. Why? Because, and this is key, because if we produce more, then the cost to society, right, of producing the next unit, right, of gasoline is greater than the benefit to society, right, of consuming the next unit of gasoline. Right? So here, right, anything beyond this point will decrease social welfare. Now, what about if we decrease production here? Well, if we stop, let's say we stop at 60, okay, we stop production at 60. Well, past 60, right, the benefit to society of gasoline is still higher than the cost to society. So as long as the benefit is higher than the cost, we should not stop producing. We should keep producing until the consumer until we cannot gain any more benefit. Okay. All right. Now let's take a graphical approach, right, to this.